Chapter 1, Introduction to Supply Chain Management. In this chapter, we'll be covering the entity view of supply chains, what supply chain management is, supply chain flows, as well as the functional view of supply chain. A supply chain is the network of suppliers that deliver products from raw materials to end customers through either an engineered or transactional flow of information, goods, and money. Now, during the pandemic, we saw that the supply chains around the world were negatively impacted when we had lockdowns. And we are still experiencing the ramifications of the pandemic on our supply chains today. So if you think about Kellogg's, who makes cereal, their supply chain involves the raw materials that go into making the cereal, producing the cereal in their factories, and then getting the product into boxes and to retail stores like Walmart and Target. That allows you, the end customer, to buy your favorite cereal. Now, during the pandemic, demand surged because everybody was at home and wanting to make sure that they had food available. So non-perishables like cereal went up in demand. Kellogg's needed to be able to respond to that demand by having good supply chain management and being able to respond to that change in demand. Now, supply chain management is the design, planning, execution, control, and monitoring of the supply chain activities with the objective of creating net value, building a competitive infrastructure, leveraging worldwide logistics, synchronizing supply with demand, and measuring performance globally. So there's a lot going on when we talk about SCM. And as you can see in these other examples here, the supply chains of products look different from one another. Whether you're making phones or you're providing banking services, the supply chains will look different. But either way, supply chain management is needed through all organizations to have SCM professionals that know how to design, plan, execute, control, and monitor. This will allow organizations to be flexible and adapt to changes or disruptions in the market. Whether it's an increase in demand or a sudden drop in demand, understanding your supply chain and building in contingencies so you know what to do when things don't go as planned is necessary and can make certain companies stand out over others. A supply chain exists wherever there is a flow of goods, information, and money between a company and its suppliers and customers. In other words, a supply chain can be viewed as a network of entities with the nucleus company at the center or the middle, and it's surrounded by multiple tiers of suppliers and customers. Suppliers are on the left or upstream, and customers are on the right or downstream. So if we use Kellogg's as our example, they make cereal and they are at the center as the manufacturer. And then their supply chain could include several tiers of suppliers on the left, labeled as supply management. And so the tier 1 suppliers or the first tier suppliers, these are suppliers that supply goods directly to Kellogg's. This could be the grain farmers or the packaging manufacturers. Then there are tier 2 or second tier suppliers. These are the tier 1 suppliers, and they could be providing things like seeds and fertilizers to the grain farmers or raw materials like paper, cardboard, plastic to the packaging manufacturers. And there could be tier 3 suppliers and so on. Now, as we move downstream or to the right side on the distribution side, Kellogg's could sell its products directly to large retail chains like your grocery store or Walmart, or they could sell it to wholesalers. Again, these are known as tier 1 or first tier customers. The retail chains sell directly to you, the end consumer, whereas the wholesaler sells to smaller retail stores or convenience stores. These are known as tier 2 customers. And then those stores sell to end consumers. Now, if we consider a service company like a bank's tier 1 suppliers would be the software companies that provide them with software solutions. And the tier 2 suppliers could be the companies that provide hardware or cloud services to the tier 1 software companies. On the customer side or on the right side, A bank's tier one has customers like you, the individual account holder, but you could also have tier two customers where the bank could be providing services to businesses who then provide goods and services to other individuals. Regardless of the kind of business you have, you can see that this entity view of supply chains just shows the complexity of like all the players involved within the supply chain. So if you think about it from a career standpoint, that's a lot of jobs. Jobs at the tier one suppliers, the tier two suppliers within the manufacturer, through distributors, retailers, at the different stores. It requires professionals that understand supply chain management and how to work with all the different businesses and customers throughout the supply chain. So a bit of history regarding the supply chain management field as it relates to our professional associations. So there are three well-known professional associations for SCM. That's the Association for Supply Chain Management, or ASCM, and they are actually the basis for a lot of the content that we learn in this class. There's the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, or CSCMP, and there's the Institute for Supply Management, or ISM. Now, in this visual, I have it laid out here because I wanted you to understand some of the areas of focus that these organizations initially began in, but have evolved over time. So ASCM started with its focus in operations management, in production, manufacturing, the transformation of raw materials into products. ISM focused more on sourcing and procurement, so think the buying and sourcing of materials needed for production. And CSCMP had its roots in logistics management, so transportation, distribution, the movement of goods. Now, over the years, ASCM, for instance, has expanded its offering its content to all aspects of the supply chain, and that's what we'll be learning in this course. Again, you can see the concept of downstream, right? So the supply management on the left, and then as you move through, you get into the operations management or the manufacturing, and then to the right is the movement, like through the distribution channels. So you can see on the left side, it's more supplier facing, and down towards the right, it's more customer facing. So what makes the field of supply chain management so interesting is the wide range of strategies that companies can use in order to get a competitive advantage. So SCM encompasses a variety of strategies to achieve organizational objectives. So you can see in the diagram here, like for an organization, they have to come up with its business strategy, followed by an organizational strategy, and then that helps to inform the supply chain strategy that is best to be used. In the reading, there's some examples here, or cases. For instance, there's Chase Bank, who used a make or buy analysis to reconfigure its supply chain network. It's a banking company, but it had travel services for customers. And so to have more control over these services, Chase decided to purchase Frosh, a travel company, so that it could actively manage this piece of its business to create more value for customers. Whereas Boeing, who makes airplanes, they reformulated their supplier relationships. So they had a shortage of airplane seats, and that's very important on an airplane. And so instead of relying on the existing supply chain, Boeing developed a strategic partnership with Adient, a leading provider of automotive seats. And so through this collaboration, Boeing could make sure that it had enough seats for its airplanes. And so that's their way of strategically overcoming or addressing this challenge. Now with FedEx, one strategy they used was to leverage technology. And so they use data science and machine learning to make shipping more efficient. And so SCM is about integrating diverse approaches and skills. So the skills that you have today, in addition to the skills that you will develop over your academic and career journey, all can contribute to the development of SCM strategies. Now that we understand what supply chain management is, let's talk about it in terms of flows. So supply chain management is about designing and managing three key flows: material, cash, and information. And so with material flow, this involves the movement of goods and materials from suppliers downstream towards the customers, including everybody in between. So for example, we look at Boeing. It bought airplane seats from Adient. So Adient is the supplier over on the left, and it flows down, the seats flow downstream to Boeing, who puts it into their airplanes. And then the airplanes flow downstream to the airlines who buy the planes. And then ultimately the consumer buys a seat on the airplane. And so they get to sit in those seats. In terms of cash flow, this is the movement of funds. This is usually in the opposite direction of material flow. So again, thinking about Boeing, they got into a partnership with Adient. And so there's a cash flow from Boeing to Adient. So they're paying for the supply of airplane seats. And then with information flow, this is the sharing and processing of information related to all the material and cash that's flowing around. This information could be like order information, delivery schedules, what are the payment terms. And so like with FedEx, for instance, they use data science and machine learning to optimize its information flow, which then enhanced everything else. It enhanced the material and cash flows. Now, things like e-commerce, so think Amazon, have made these three flows more efficient and faster. So if you think about like the last time you were on Amazon and you're thinking about buying something, you can, see what other people are buying. You can see what the price is, sometimes the availability, especially like when Amazon has those like crazy Prime Day sales, unlike traditional supply chains. So this real-time information lets companies manage their material and cash flows more effectively. Now, the downside, though, to e-commerce, though, is something called reverse logistics, which we'll learn more later in the course. But this has to do with the flow of goods from the customer back to the manufacturer or the distributor. So think about the time you bought something, you didn't like it didn't work, it broke something, and then you returned it to maybe to the store or directly to the manufacturer. And with e-commerce, return rates are very high. It could be as high as like 30%. And so with material flow now in reverse, these goods are moving back to the manufacturer and they need people to manage it, right? And to manage it involves, are we giving refunds or credits? What happens to the things that get taken back? Or do you just let the customer keep it because it costs too much to like send back? What a lot of people don't realize is that everyone in a company is to some degree involved in supply chain activities. So they're contributing to the process of planning and executing the manufacturing and delivery of materials and services. Now, there are several key roles that are integral to the functioning of a supply chain, and we'll look at them here. So the first is purchasing. So this group is responsible for procuring or buying the materials and services needed for a company to run. So in my first job, I worked at an aerospace and defense company procuring or buying the IT and server equipment needed for the data centers that we were building for the government. And we were helping them, manage all of their intelligence information. Then there's the other things that a company needs, like desks, furniture, electricity. Those are indirect purchases, and I actually ended up switching over to that and doing more buying of the things that a company needs to run. Now, operations is your next function here, and this involves transforming inputs into outputs. So think raw materials into a final product. So if we look at the Boeing example, that's the assembly of airplane seats into an airplane. The next function is marketing and sales. And so this group is responsible for understanding the customer needs and their preferences while also promoting and selling the company's, products or services. It's really important, I found, when I was working in purchasing, that I had good relationships with marketing so that I could understand what it was that they were, trying to sell to customers, what customers wanted, because then that informed not only the design of our products, but who we would buy materials from to make sure that it met the needs of the customer. The next function is accounting and finance, and they help manage the financial resources of the company. And that includes the cash flow or money that's related to the supply chain. At Amazon, for example, the accounting and finance function would be responsible for managing the cash flow from customers and to suppliers, right? So we need to pay our suppliers for the things that they give us, and we need to collect money from our customers. Then there's research and development, also known as R&D, and this function is responsible for developing new products or services or improving existing ones. When I worked at a medical device company, I was doing procurement or sourcing, and I was often supporting the R&D department who were trying to figure out new products for our hospital customers, which in turn helped, patients. And so they were looking for suppliers who had like cool technologies or new processes that would help in the development of these new products. Then there's human resources, or HR, and they help manage the firm's human resources through hiring, training, managing personnel. And so while HR, hires, trains, and manages people in all functions, is really important too, because they help find the supply chain professionals needed with the skills who can manage a company's supply chain effectively. Then there's the engineering function, and they're responsible for the design and development of a firm's products or services. Like, we've identified the product or service that we need, now we have to design and how we'll, make it. So in an example, back to Boeing, the engineering function there is responsible for designing and developing aircraft. And if you have noticed in the news, there's been issues with the engineering behind Boeing's planes, and that has caused concerns by, airlines who don't want to buy the planes or use the planes any further, and then airline customers who, are concerned about flying in certain Boeing aircraft. So when there's an issue within a function in a company, it gets reflected and can impact the company's reputation and ultimately its bottom line. Last but not least is the information technology function. IT helps support the other functions by providing technology and systems needed to run. So when I was, in procurement at a variety of companies, I often worked closely with IT because they would help support any software that we were buying to get it implemented into the company appropriately. They help support even the systems that I used as a procurement professional. They will help implement systems and software for all of the functions, HR, engineering, whatever tech they needed. IT was there to figure out how to put it into the company, how to use it, help with training and making sure that it's working. Now, something to be aware of, though, is something called the silo effect. In many organizations, and I've seen this at work myself, it's common that functions or departments work in isolation from each other. So they're not talking to each other or sharing information, or sometimes they might even be competing against each other for resources like budget or people. And so it is really important for the supply chain to be effectively run, is that these departments or functions collaborate with each other rather than competing against each other. And so there's different ways to help, avoid or mitigate the silo effect. And that's improving communication and coordination, having meetings across departments or interdepartmental meetings, having cross-functional teams, or having job rotation programs so that employees can better understand the organization. So in my career in supply chain, I was a part of many cross-functional teams. So that's where a person from each of the functions are in a team to work on a project or a task while still working within their respective functions. So it's great because you can learn about the other functions, take that information, bring it back to your department. But the bigger thing I found was that by working in cross-functional teams, you're building relationships, people are getting to know you. And so when you're looking around to move into different areas of the company, they know you, they know how good you are at your role, and your chances of moving up and across the company increases. With supply chain management, it's really important for those involved, whether you're an executive, a manager, or an individual contributor, to understand what your role is in the supply chain and how it fits in the grand scheme of things. And so it's important to understand that when we're making decisions, that a decision in one department will impact the other parts of the supply chain, the other functions. So that's why it's so important to work collaboratively so that we make the right decisions together that create positive outcomes for the entire company. So if you have any questions, just let me know.